My cousins were literally laughing as I walked out of the lawyer's office with a single, dusty envelope. They had just split $14 million, and I had been left with a letter. But what they didn't know was that my grandfather had spent the last 5 years of his life setting a trap, and they had just walked right into it. There were 11 of us in that room. My Uncle Gerald, the eldest son, sat at the head of the table like he already owned the place. My Aunt Patricia beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue that hadn't been wet once. My cousins, Derek, Brandon, and Vanessa, lined up like vultures on a branch, trying to look sad while their eyes kept darting toward the lawyer's briefcase. My mother sat in the corner, quiet, invisible, the way the family had always preferred her. And me, Nathan. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat nobody chose on purpose, the leftover seat, the one closest to the door, which, looking back, was fitting. Because the porters had been showing me the door my entire life. Now, before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the laughter, the humiliation, and the thing I inherited that none of them saw coming, if you've ever been the black sheep, hit subscribe. This next part is for you. Now, back to the office. This story has a twist that I promise you will not see coming. And if you're already subscribed, smash that like button. Every single thing helps this channel grow, so I can keep bringing you stories like this. Deal? Good. Let's keep going. The lawyer, a man named Arthur Kessler, who had been my grandfather's attorney for over 30 years, opened the folder. His face betrayed nothing. Lawyers are trained for that. But I noticed something. Just before he began reading, his eyes found mine. Just for a second. Just a flicker. And in that flicker, I saw something that confused me at the time but makes perfect sense now. He looked at me like he was sorry. Not sorry for my loss. Sorry for what was about to happen. I, Harold Eugene Porter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. The room went rigid. Every back straightened. Every breath held. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Not the funeral. Not the memorial. Not the eulogies they had each delivered with practiced emotion and rehearsed tears. This, the money, the property, in the empire that Harold Porter had spent 60 years building. My grandfather started with nothing, a high school dropout from a coal town in West Virginia who moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, with $40 and a work ethic that most people can't even imagine. He started in construction, framing houses, pouring foundations. By the time he was 35, he owned the company. By 50, he owned 6 commercial properties across the Carolinas. By 65, his portfolio was worth, and I'm telling you the real number, just over $14 million. $14 million. Built brick by brick, deal by deal, handshake by handshake, by a man who never went to college and never apologized for it. And now that man is gone, and everyone in that room wanted a piece. Arthur Kessler began with the smaller bequests: $20,000 to the church, $15,000 to a veterans organization, his gold watch to Arthur himself, a personal touch that made the old lawyer's voice crack for just a moment. Then came the family. To my son, Gerald Eugene Porter, I leave the primary residence at 441 Lakeview Drive, valued at approximately $1.2 million, along with all furnishings and contents therein. Gerald nodded slowly. The house, the big one, the lake house where every family gathering had taken place. He looked satisfied but not surprised. He had been expecting this. He had been positioning himself for this for years. To my daughter, Patricia Ann Porter Whitfield, I leave the commercial property portfolio consisting of 6 properties to be managed through the existing LLC, and with an estimated annual revenue of approximately $380,000. Patricia's tissue finally touched a real tear. But it was a tear of relief, not grief. She had the income stream, the cash cow, the gift that would keep giving for decades. To my grandchildren, Derek, Brandon, and Vanessa, I leave equal shares of the investment accounts held at First Union Trust, currently valued at approximately $2.1 million, to be divided in 3 equal portions, $700,000 each. My cousins exchanged glances. Brandon actually smiled. Vanessa whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Derek just nodded, like this was his birthright being fulfilled on schedule. And then the room went quiet, 'cause there were only 2 names left on the family tree that hadn't been mentioned. My mother and me. Arthur Kessler turned the page. And what he read next? Those next few sentences, they broke something inside me, and then they rebuilt it into something nobody in that room was prepared for. But before we get there, real quick, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing where these stories travel. Last time we had people from over 40 countries watching. Let's see if we can beat that with this one. And while you're down there, tell me, have you ever been treated like you don't matter by your own family? Because if you have, this story is going to be different. To understand what happened in that room, you need to understand my mother. And you need to understand why the Porters treated us like we were a stain on the family name. My mother, Karen, was Harold Porter's youngest child, the baby of the family. And, for a while, she was the favorite, smart, funny, artistic. My grandfather used to call her my little firecracker because she was the only one in the family who would argue with him and make him laugh at the same time. But when my mother was 22, she made a decision that the Porter family never forgave her for. She married my father, Thomas Nathan Reed, Tommy. Tommy was a mechanic, a good one, hardworking, honest, kind, but in the eyes of Gerald and Patricia, he was beneath them. He didn't come from money. He didn't wear suits. He drove a truck with grease under his fingernails and spoke with a country accent that made Patricia cringe at dinner parties. My mother didn't care. She loved him. And for a few years, they were happy. They had me. They bought a small house. Tommy opened his own repair shop. Life was simple but good. Then Tommy got sick. Cancer. The ugly kind that moves fast and doesn't negotiate. He was gone within 8 months. I was 6 years old. And here's where the family dynamic turned poisonous. When my mother, grieving, broke, trying to raise a child alone, asked Gerald and Patricia for help, they refused. Not just declined. Refused with judgment. Gerald told her, "You chose that life, Karen. You married nobody, and now you're living with nobody's consequences." Patricia sent a sympathy card. A card. For her own sister's husband's passing. My grandfather was different. Harold Porter, despite his flaws, despite his old-fashioned ways, had a heart. He helped my mother with bills. He showed up at my school events. He taught me to fish, to build things, and to shake hands properly. When I was 12, he told me something I never forgot. "Nathan, this family has money, but money isn't what makes a man. What makes a man is what he does when nobody's watching. Remember that." I remembered it. Every single day. But as I got older and Harold got older, Gerald and Patricia tightened their grip. They moved closer to my grandfather. They visited more often. They brought their children around constantly. They managed his finances. They drove him to appointments. And slowly, deliberately, they built a wall between Harold and us. They obviously didn't do it. They were smarter than that. They did it with scheduling. "Oh, Dad's busy this weekend? Maybe another time." They did it with whispers. "Karen can't even manage her own bills. How can we trust her around Dad's affairs?" They did it with exclusion, family dinners that we weren't told about until after they happened. By the time I was 18, I saw my grandfather maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Each time, he looked older, frailer, and each time, Gerald or Patricia was hovering nearby, controlling the conversation, limiting the visit. "He needs his rest, Nathan. You should go." I should go. From my own grandfather's house, the man who taught me to tie a fishing line, the man who sat with me at my father's funeral when I was too small to understand what a casket was. I should go. Now, I want to pause here and say something directly to you. If this story is resonating with you, if you know what it feels like to be pushed out of your own family, type, "I know this feeling" in the comments. Seriously, because there's something powerful about saying it out loud, even in a comment section, and I promise you, you're not alone. And hey, if you haven't hit that bell icon yet, do it now. Turn on all notifications. Because the second half of this story, that's where everything flips. You do not want to miss it. My grandfather passed away on a Tuesday in October. He was 87. I got the call from Arthur Kessler. Not from my uncle, not from my aunt. The family lawyer called me because nobody else thought so. I found out later that Gerald and Patricia had been at the hospital. They had been there when he went, and they didn't call us. My mother found out from a neighbor who saw the ambulance, her own father. And she found out from a neighbor. At the funeral, we were seated in the 3rd row. Not the 1st row, where Gerald and Patricia and the grandchildren sat. The 3rd row, behind family friends, behind colleagues, behind people who had known Harold Porter for a fraction of the time we had. My mother held my hand through the entire service. She didn't cry in front of them. She saved it for the car afterward. And in that car, she wept in a way that I had only heard once before, the day my father passed. That was the fuel. That grief, that injustice, that deliberate cruelty wrapped in politeness. That was the fuel for everything that came next. Back to the lawyer's office. Back to the room with 11 people and 1 folder. Arthur Kessler had just finished distributing millions of dollars worth of property, investments, and assets to Gerald, Patricia, and their children. The room was buzzing with quiet satisfaction. They had gotten what they came for. And then Arthur read the next line. "To my daughter, Karen Elizabeth Porter Reed, I leave the sum of $5,000, with my love and my apologies for the distance that grew between us in my final years." $5,000. The room reacted exactly how you'd expect. Gerald leaned back in his chair with a smirk he didn't even try to hide. Patricia looked down at her tissue with a small, satisfied nod. Derek actually chuckled. Not laughed. Chuckled. That quiet, dismissive sound that says, "You got exactly what you deserved." My mother's face didn't change. She had expected this. She had told me in the car on the way over, "Don't expect anything, Nathan. They've had years to work on him." But I hadn't expected it. Not like this. $5,000 from a $14 million estate. For his own daughter. the one who named her son after him. Nathan, my middle name, was Harold's middle name. The one whose husband he had mourned, the one he had called my little firecracker. $5,000 and an apology. Then came my part. To my grandson, Nathan Harold Reed. The room shifted. Gerald sat up straighter. Patricia's tissue stopped moving. The cousins turned to look at me. Not with curiosity, with amusement. They were waiting for the punchline, waiting to hear what scraps the old man had left for the grandson from the wrong side of the family. Arthur Kessler paused, and I saw it again. That look, that flicker of something in his eyes. He took a breath and continued. To my grandson, Nathan Harold Reed, I leave the following: a sealed envelope, to be opened privately, containing materials and instructions that are for his eyes only. Silence. Then Gerald spoke. That's it? An envelope? Arthur nodded. Those are the terms of the will. Brandon laughed. Not a chuckle this time. A laugh. He got a letter. The old man left him a letter. Vanessa smirked. Derek shook his head with mock sympathy. Tough break, Nate. Patricia turned to my mother with a look of such practiced pity that I wanted to flip the table. I'm sure it's something sentimental, Karen. Your father always had a soft spot for gestures. A gesture. They reduced my grandfather's final communication with me to a gesture, a consolation prize, a pat on the head from beyond the grave. And here's the thing. In that moment, I believed them. I sat there holding an envelope while my cousins divided $700,000 each, and I thought, this is it. This is what I meant to him. A letter and a life lesson about hard work and character. My mother squeezed my hand. Let's go, she whispered. And we left. We walked out of that office and into the parking lot, and I heard them laughing through the window. Actually laughing. The sound followed us to the car. It followed us down the highway. It followed me into bed that night. They laughed. Hold that thought. Because I need you to remember that laughter. I need you to burn it into your memory. Because in about 10 minutes of this story, that laughter is going to turn into something very, very different. Quick reminders, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. Don't wait until the end. That one click tells YouTube to show this story to more people who need to hear it. More people who've been laughed at by the people who should have loved them. One click. Do it now. I'll wait. Done? Good. Let's open the envelope. And I waited 3 days. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I was preparing myself for disappointment. Maybe some part of me wanted to hold on to the possibility that it was something meaningful. Hold on to it just a little longer before reality crushed it. On the third night, sitting on the floor of my small apartment, a one-bedroom in a complex that smelled like carpet cleaner and old paint, I opened the envelope. Inside were 4 items. The first was a letter, handwritten. 3 pages. My grandfather's handwriting, shaky but deliberate. The handwriting of a man who knew this was the last thing he would ever write to me. The second was a key, small, bronze, old-fashioned, the kind of key that opens a lockbox or a safe deposit box. The third was a business card for a law firm I'd never heard of, not Arthur Kessler's firm. A different one, in Charleston, South Carolina. The fourth was a photograph, black and white. My grandfather as a young man, maybe 30, standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. On the back, in his handwriting, where it all started. It's yours now. I read the letter, and within the first paragraph, everything I thought I knew about my grandfather, about the will, about my place in this family. All of it shattered and reassembled into something I never could have imagined. The letter began, "Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if the will was read the way I instructed, everyone in that room thinks you got nothing." That's exactly what I wanted them to think. What I'm about to tell you, I couldn't put in the official will, because Gerald and Patricia would have contested it, delayed it, and destroyed it with lawyers before you ever saw a penny. So I did something different. Something they'll never see coming. Just like you, kid. They never saw you coming either. My hands were shaking. The letter explained everything. Over the last 5 years of his life, my grandfather had been quietly, secretly, restructuring a portion of his assets. Working with the law firm in Charleston, he had established a separate trust, not managed by Arthur Kessler, not visible to Gerald or Patricia, completely independent, completely legal, completely hidden. The trust contained 3 things. First, the original building where Harold Porter had started his construction company in 1967. The building in the photograph. It sat on a commercial lot in downtown Charleston that had been quietly appreciating in value for decades. Current estimated value, $3.2 million. Second, a cash reserve of $800,000 held in a separate account, earmarked specifically for operating costs, education, or investment at my discretion. Third, and this is the one that still makes my chest tight when I think about it, the complete intellectual property rights to a modular construction system that my grandfather had patented in the 1980s. A system that, at the time, nobody cared about. But now, with the boom in prefab and modular housing, that patent was being quietly licensed by 2 major construction firms. Annual licensing revenue, $270,000 per year. Per year. Let me say that again. $270,000 every single year, automatically deposited into the trust that now bore my name. My grandfather hadn't left me a letter. He had left me an empire, a separate, hidden, legally untouchable empire that Gerald and Patricia didn't know about and couldn't contest. The letter continued. Gerald and Patricia spent the last 10 years trying to control me, Nathan. They moved close. They managed my calendar. They kept your mother away. I let them think it worked because fighting them would have torn the family apart while I was still alive. But I was never confused. I always knew who they were. And I always knew who you were. You're the only one in this family who ever reminded me of myself. Not because you're perfect. Because you're honest. Because you work. Because you show up for people without keeping score. The house, the properties, the investment accounts. Gerald and Patricia can have them. They were always about the money anyway. Let them choke on it. And what I'm giving you is what money can't buy and what they can't take. A foundation. Build on it, Nathan. Build something that would make your father proud. Build something that would make me proud. I already know you will. I sat on that floor for 2 hours. I read the letter 4 times. I held that bronze key in my palm until it was warm from my skin. And then I called the law firm in Charleston. All right. I need to stop here for just a second. Because if this story is making you feel something right now, anger, hope, satisfaction, anything, I need you to do me a favor. Share this video. Send it to someone. Text the link to a friend. Post it in your story. Because this story isn't just entertainment. It's a message A message that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who get laughed at in the lawyer's office, sometimes they're the ones who end up with everything. Share it. Let's make this one travel. Okay, back to the story. The next 6 months were the most intense of my life. I drove to Charleston. I met with the law firm, Henderson and Marks. They had been holding this trust for 3 years, waiting for my grandfather to pass, waiting for the trigger clause that would activate the transfer. They had never met me before, but they knew everything about me. My grandfather had given them a complete file. My school records, my work history, even a recording he'd made of himself talking about me. They played it for me in the conference room. His voice, that gravel and honey voice that I hadn't heard in months, coming through a small speaker on a polished table. Nathan's a good kid. I better than good. He's got his father's hands and his mother's heart and my stubbornness. Don't let anyone tell him he doesn't deserve what I'm leaving him. He's the only one who does. I broke down. Right there in that conference room with 2 lawyers I'd never met. I put my head in my hands and I cried like I was 6 years old again, sitting in the front row of my father's funeral, not understanding why everyone was so sad. But I didn't stay broken. I couldn't. My grandfather didn't leave me this gift so I could sit in it. He left it so I could build with it. I took inventory. The building in Charleston needed renovation but was structurally sound. The location was incredible. 2 blocks from a major development zone that the city had earmarked for expansion. The cash reserve gave me operating capital. The patent licensing gave me income. I enrolled in a business management program. Not a 4-year degree. I didn't have time for that. An accelerated program focused on real estate and business operations. I studied during the day and worked on renovation plans at night. I hired a small team, a contractor, a woman named Denise, who had worked in modular construction for 20 years and nearly fainted when I told her I owned the patent rights. An accountant named Miguel who helped me structure the trust for maximum tax efficiency. And a property manager named Terrence, who knew the Charleston market like the back of his hand. Within 6 months, the building was renovated. Ground floor, a co-working space for local entrepreneurs and small businesses. Upper floors, 4 premium apartment units in one of the most desirable locations in downtown Charleston. Monthly rental income from the building alone, $18,000. Combined with the patent licensing, $270,000 annually. Combined with the cash reserve earning interest, approximately $32,000 annually. I was 26 years old, and I was quietly, without fanfare, without announcements, without posting a single thing on social media, becoming wealthier than any of the cousins who had laughed at me in that lawyer's office. But I didn't tell them. Not yet. Because here's what my grandfather taught me. Even from beyond the grave, you don't announce your power. You build it in silence. You let it grow in the dark. And when the time is right, when the people who dismissed you are standing in exactly the right spot, you let them see it. Not because you need their approval, but because the truth deserves to be told, and the time was about to be very, very right. Hey, before we get to the part where everything collides, let me ask you something. Who in your life has underestimated you? Who looked at you and decided you weren't worth their time? Type their first name in the comments. Just the initial. You'll know who it is, and so will they. Someday. Trust me on that. While I was building, the Porters were burning. Gerald got the lake house. Beautiful property. $1.2 million. But what Gerald didn't get was a plan. He didn't get financial discipline. He didn't get my grandfather's work ethic. He got a house, and he treated it like an ATM. Within a year, Gerald had taken out a home equity loan against the property, $400,000. And to fund a business venture that was really just Gerald and his golf buddies pretending to be developers, they bought a plot of land for a shopping center that never got built. The money evaporated. The loan remained. Gerald was now sitting in a $1.2 million house with $400,000 in debt and no income to service it. Patricia did marginally better, but only because the commercial properties generated revenue. The problem was Patricia. She had never managed anything in her life. My grandfather had a property management company handling everything. When he died, the management contracts expired, and Patricia decided she could do it herself. She couldn't. Within 18 months, 2 of the 6 properties had major tenant disputes. One had a code violation that cost $85,000 to fix. Revenue dropped by 40%. And the cousins? $700,000 split 3 ways. Brandon bought a sports car and a condo he couldn't maintain. Vanessa invested in a friend's restaurant that closed within a year. Derek, to his credit, put most of his share into index funds, but then pulled half of it out to help Gerald with his loan payments. The money was disappearing. The empire my grandfather had built was crumbling. Not because the assets were bad. The assets were excellent, because the people managing them had no idea what they were doing. They had inherited wealth without inheriting wisdom, and that's like being handed a race car when you've never learned to drive. Within 2 years, Gerald was facing foreclosure. Patricia was losing tenants. The cousins' accounts were shrinking. And quietly, about 400 miles south in Charleston, my accounts were growing. I didn't gloat. I didn't call. I didn't send Christmas cards with my financial statements attached. I just kept building. But then, something happened that forced my hand. Something that changed the dynamic from silent growth to direct confrontation. Gerald called my mother, for the first time in years, not to apologize, not to reconnect, not to acknowledge that he had treated his own sister like garbage for 2 decades. He called to ask for money. He had somehow, through family gossip, through a cousin who talked too much, through the kind of small-town information network that never sleeps, heard a rumor that Karen's son, the kid with the letter, the boy from the wrong side of the family, was doing well. Really well, was the phrase that reached Gerald's ears. And he called my mother and said, and these are her exact words when she told me, "Karen, I know we've had our differences, but family is family. I'm in a tough spot. If Nathan could help out with a short-term loan, I'd make it worth his while." A short-term loan. From the grandson he laughed at. From the kid he didn't call when his grandfather died. From the family member he was seated in the 3rd row at the funeral. My mother called me right after. She wasn't angry. She was something worse. She was amused. In that tired, sad way that people get amused when someone who hurt them proves, one more time, exactly who they are. "What do you want to do?" she asked me. And I said 4 words that I had been holding inside for over 2 years. Invite them to Charleston. Guys, we're getting close to the moment where everything comes together. But before we get there, I need to know you're with me. Hit that like button if you think Gerald deserves what's coming. Hit subscribe if you want to see how this ends. And turn on that bell, because I drop stories like this regularly, And every single one of them has a moment like what's about to happen next. Don't miss it. They came on a Saturday in March. Gerald, Patricia, and all 3 cousins. My mother and I met them at a restaurant in downtown Charleston, neutral territory. At least, that's what they thought. Gerald looked rough, thinner, grayer. The confidence that had filled that lawyer's office 2 years earlier was gone, replaced by something I had never seen on his face before. Need. Gerald Porter needed something from someone, and that someone was me. Patricia was still performing, still put together on the surface, but I noticed the cracks. Her jewelry was simpler. Her car in the parking lot was a lease, not a purchase. She was managing decline with elegance, but decline was winning. The cousins were quiet. Brandon had sold the sports car. Vanessa was working retail. Derek just looked tired. We sat down, we ordered food, small talk, weather. The kind of meaningless conversation that families use to avoid saying what they actually came to say. Finally, Gerald cleared his throat. Nathan, I'll get to the point. The family's been through some changes since Dad passed. Some of us are in better positions than others. I've heard you're doing well, and I'm happy for you. Really, I am. He wasn't happy for me. He wasn't even convinced about it. I'm wondering if you'd consider a family partnership, a business arrangement, pool some resources, combine some assets, keep things in the Porter family. A family partnership. He wanted access to my money through a structure that would give him leverage without giving him accountability. Gerald hadn't changed. He had just gotten desperate. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I looked at Patricia, at Derek, at Brandon, at Vanessa, each of them, one by one, the way my grandfather used to look at people when he was sizing them up. Then I said, "Let me show you something." We walked 2 blocks. Nobody spoke. The Charleston air was warm and thick with salt from the harbor. We turned a corner, and there it was. The building. My grandfather's building, the one from the photograph, but transformed, renovated, gleaming. A modern facade with clean lines, large windows, a tasteful sign that read, Porter Reed Development. The name I had chosen specifically because it combined both halves of my identity. The Porter legacy, the Reed heart. Gerald stopped walking. His mouth opened slightly. Patricia's hand went to her chest. "This is mine," I said, simply. Without drama, without showmanship, just fact. Grandpa left it to me, along with the patent rights to his modular construction system, along with a trust that he spent the last 5 years of his life building in secret. Specifically because he knew that if he put it in the official will, you would contest it. Silence. "He knew what you were doing," I continued. "The scheduling, the isolation, keeping Mom away, controlling his calendar. He knew all of it, and he let you do it because fighting you would have destroyed the family while he was still alive. But he wasn't confused. He wasn't senile. He was strategic." Gerald's face was white. Patricia was gripping her purse like it was the only solid thing in the world. The $5,000 he left Mom in the will? That was intentional. He told me in the letter. He left it small on purpose so you wouldn't suspect there was anything else. So you'd laugh. So you'd feel comfortable. So you'd let your guard down while the real inheritance was transferred quietly, legally, and permanently into my name. I let that sink in. He played you, Uncle Gerald. He played all of you, the same way you played him for 10 years. The difference is, he did it out of love. For me. for my mom, for the memory of my father, who you called a nobody. Gerald tried to speak. Nathan, I never... You laughed, I said. Quietly. Not with anger. With something harder than anger. With truth. In that lawyer's office, when Arthur read me the envelope, Brandon laughed. Derek said, "Tough break." Patricia called it a gesture. And you sat there with that smirk on your face like you had won. I paused. You didn't win. You never won. You inherited money from a man you manipulated and you burned through it in 2 years. I inherited wisdom from a man who loved me, and I built something that will last for generations. I looked at Gerald directly. There's no partnership, Uncle Gerald. There's no family fund. There's no short-term loan. You had a family, a sister who would have helped you, a nephew who would have been loyal to you, and you threw us away because my father was a mechanic. That's what you traded for a lake house you can't afford. I turned to my mother. She was standing behind me, tears on her face, but she was standing straight, tall, visible. Not in the corner, not in the third row, right there. We're done here, I said, and we walked away. Gerald lost the lake house 6 months later. Foreclosure. The bank took it. My grandfather's home, the place where every Thanksgiving and every Christmas had been held for 40 years, was sold to a developer who turned it into a vacation rental. Patricia eventually hired a real property management company, but the damage was done. 2 of the 6 commercial properties were sold at a loss to cover the code violations and legal fees. Her annual revenue dropped from $380,000 to just over $140,000. Brandon moved in with Gerald. Vanessa was still in retail. Derek, to his credit, reached out to me about a year later, not for money, just to talk. He said, "I should have said something in that lawyer's office. I knew it was wrong. I'm sorry." I appreciated that. Derek was the only one who ever apologized without needing something from me first. My mother and I are closer than ever. I bought her a house. Not a mansion, not a showpiece. A comfortable 3-bedroom near the coast with a garden and a porch where she drinks her coffee every morning and reads. She cried when I gave her the keys. She said, "Your grandfather would be so happy." I know he would. Porter Reed Development now employs 12 people. We specialize in modular and sustainable construction. Building on my grandfather's patent in ways he probably never imagined. We've completed 3 residential projects and 2 commercial builds. We're profitable. We're growing. And every single morning, when I walk into that building, the building from the photograph, the building where Harold Porter started with $40 and a dream, I look at his picture on the wall and I say the same thing. Thank you, Grandpa. I'm building. One more thing, and this is important. Gerald called me one more time about 8 months after the Charleston meeting. He was emotional, maybe drunk. He said, "Your grandfather should have left all of it to me. I was the oldest. I earned it." I said, "You didn't earn anything, Uncle Gerald. You positioned yourself. There's a difference." Grandpa knew the difference. That's why he gave you the house and gave me the future. He hung up. We haven't spoken since. People ask me all the time, "Nathan, what did you really inherit?" And they expect me to say the building, the patent, the trust, the money. But that's not what I inherited. What I inherited was a lesson that took my grandfather 87 years to live and 3 handwritten pages to teach. The lesson is this: the loudest people in the room are rarely the most powerful. The ones who grab, who position, who manipulate, who laugh at others to feel bigger. They're the ones running on empty. They need the money because without it, they have nothing. No character, no resilience, no identity beyond the balance in their account. The quiet ones. The ones who get seated in the back row. Yet the ones who get handed an envelope while everyone else gets checks. The ones who get laughed at on the worst day of their lives. Those are the ones to watch. Because they're building something that money can't buy and lawyers can't contest. They're building themselves. My grandfather saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. He saw it because he recognized it. He had been that kid once. The one from the coal town with nothing. The one everyone dismissed. The one who built an empire while the world looked the other way. He didn't leave me money. He left me a mirror. A mirror that showed me who I already was and who I could become. Gerald inherited a house. Patricia inherited properties. The cousins inherited cash. I inherited my grandfather's belief that I was worth investing in. And that single belief from a single person is worth more than $14 million. If someone in your life made you feel small today, a parent, a sibling, a boss, a partner, a so-called friend, I want you to hear this clearly. Their opinion of you is not your destiny. It's their limitation. It's the ceiling of their own imagination. And you are not required to live under someone else's ceiling. Build your own house. Build your own empire. Build your own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. And when they come knocking, and they will come knocking, you'll have a choice. A choice my grandfather gave me, and I'm giving to you. You can let them in, or you can let them watch. Either way, you'll be standing in a building you built yourself, and no one can take that away from you. And they laughed when I was left out of the will. They laughed when I got a letter, a key, and a photograph. They laughed because they thought the story was over. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. And now, right now, if you're going through your own chapter 1, if you're sitting in your own back row, if you're holding your own envelope while everyone else celebrates, keep going. Your chapter 7 is coming. And it will be worth every silent, overlooked, underestimated moment that came before it. I promise you that. All right, that's the story. And if it hit you the way I think it did, I need 3 things from you before you click away. 1. Smash that like button. Seriously, destroy it. That tells YouTube this story matters and it pushes it to more people who need to hear it. 2. Subscribe and hit the bell. I tell stories like this every single week. Real stories about real people who were counted out and came back swinging. If you're not subscribed, you're missing them. 3. Drop a comment. Tell me. What would you have done? Would you have helped Gerald? Would you have turned him away? Or would you have done something completely different? I want to hear it. I read every single comment. Share this with someone who needs it tonight. Someone who's been laughed at. Someone who's been overlooked. Someone who's holding their own envelope and doesn't know what's inside yet. Tell them to open it. I'll see you in the next one.